Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the July Friends Forum, and we're really glad you're here. You got a little good blues music anyway, if nothing else works. And we believe it's all going to work this time. If you tried to sign on for the forum just, a week and a half ago, we had one of those ministry times when everything blew up. And I think part of it was the fact that we had 1,100 kids in the building with 900 volunteers, and it was cray. And I don't think the internet could handle it, but I think we're good. We learn from our mistakes, right? So anyway, we're glad you're here. And if you're a pastor and would like an encouraging text before you preach, I make a video and send it to you by text every week. You can text PASTOR to 833-349-7516, or you can take a screenshot and do it later. If you're not a pastor and you would like some encouragement, you can text WORRY to 833-349-7516. And only text PASTOR or WORRY. Don't text both. And don't say, hey, that's great, Greg. None of that. Just PASTOR or WORRY to 833-349-7516, and we will send you a video every week. If you're a pastor, it'll be every Sunday and Wednesday. If you are not a pastor, it'll be every Wednesday. And we enjoy doing that. And excited about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to dive into a conversation that is deeply personal for most of us. We're going to talk about ministry when it hurts. And I'm Greg Surratt, and let me bring in my sidekick, Judd. There he is. And good friend, co-author. And between the two of us, we've walked through some pretty tough seasons. But anyway, before we talk about that, good to see you, Chip.
Good to be here.
What is up with the rock and roll theme behind you?
I just used ChatGPT, threw some thoughts in there, and that's what it came up with. So I'm just giving it a try.
I'm kind of worried about you if that's what it came up with. I mean,
I know it. It told me that it can't use the actual album covers.
Right.
So it uses, it kind of makes one up.
Gotcha. Well, mine isn't Chat GPT. It's just three of my favorite guitars on the wall here in my office. But
they are pretty.
We're old rock and rollers, I guess. That's
who was that you opened up with, the blues? Who was that?
That's just, I don't know. It's just, you can't use music that is it's kind of Chat GPT can't do the album behind you, and so you have to, anyway, you purchase something, and I just like blues.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so anyway, well, listen, we're going to talk about ministry hurt, and we've both come through just some things in our lives recently. Of course, between us, I was trying to figure, how long have you been in ministry, Chip?
45 years.
So there's almost 100 years.
Wow.
Almost 100 years between the two of us. That just says that we're old, I think. I don't know. But now we've been through a lot of times, been through some exciting times, great seasons, and also been through some broken seasons and difficult seasons. And Recently, you had a major lung transplant, and
Yeah,
how you doing with that? Just how you feeling right now?
I'm doing great, man.
Good.
There's the medications are such that there's things we're still having to stay on top of and whatever. But bottom line, dude, I'm back in the gym working out. I feel good. Still have the shakes a little bit, which is a little creepy. But
that's a medicine thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
They should be subsiding.
yeah.
Um, and but I'm doing great, man. Thank you for everybody that prayed, that gave toward the Caring Bridge stuff. And I mean, I felt I felt the support, felt the love, and still do, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So appreciate
Well,
it.
that brings out the best in all of us when we,
Yeah.
care about a friend. And I'm glad you're here. And then I had the unexpected loss of my brother earlier this year. We'll talk about a lot of that in just a little bit. But through it all, ministry didn't stop. So today we're asking the question, how do you keep leading when your heart is heavy? How do you show up with integrity even when you're grieving and discouraged or maybe in physical pain? And before we jump in, I want to do this a little audience participation. What I'd like to do is, I know today we are live on Pastors Collective YouTube channel, and that's where we're broadcasting from, and we will be broadcasting regularly from the YouTube channel. And if you sign up for the encouragement, it comes from the YouTube channel. And but we're also, I think, on Facebook for Pastors Collective, and I think we're on my Facebook. So wherever you are, we'll get your. If you go in the comments, and if you have a comment, great, put a comment in. If you have a question later on, we're going to do a Q&A. And at any point, if you'll just put a Q first and then do your question, we'll be able to get to it real quickly. But we'll do a Q&A just a little bit later about ministry hurt and, what it's like to do ministry through pain. But what I wanted to do is in the comments, what's one of the hardest things that you've had to lead through? What's one of the hardest things that you've had to lead through, whether you're a pastor or a leader? Keep it simple, just a word or a phrase. We're not going to compare our pain, but just acknowledge that it's real and that you're not alone. But go ahead and drop that in the chat, and we'll take just a minute to read through those if we have some. Chip, what about you? You've led through hard things. What's some of the hardest things that you've led through? You thought about that?
Yeah. Yeah. The lung transplant, I wasn't really in a leadership role. I mean,
Right.
the things we do and all that, but so obviously that was a tricky season. But the hardest things I've led through are when people have hurt me. Um, I had a bit of a rebellion in my church years ago when I kind of backed up and changed my theology. I was a hardcore word of faith guy, and just kind of over a period of time realized some of what I was teaching just wasn't kind. And so I kind of started to change what I taught on.
Yeah.
And gosh, I had some people get mad at me. I mean, said hateful stuff, man. Uh, and then I've been hurt a couple of times by other ministers. That those are probably the hardest things that stand out to me.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I think for me, early on, uh, uh, we had personal tragedy at
Yeah.
the beginning of starting this church. I've talked about that a little bit in the past. We had a major car wreck where my son was severely injured, was unconscious for a couple of weeks in the hospital. We're brand new to the city. And
Wow.
then my daughter had a jet ski accident and nearly killed her. I mean, the doctors were amazed that she lived through it. And at the same time, my mother died. And I can remember, leading during those times, preaching during those times. I remember my wife Debbie saying, If this is what we've got to do to grow a church, I'm kind of out. Okay. I understood that
Yeah,
intuitively, but sometimes you'll get up to preach, which is a good part of what we do, and there'll be adrenaline that comes, from difficult times. I had a couple of weeks ago, I was supposed to speak at a very large church in Indianapolis. I did everything I could to get there. They had major weather mess up in Atlanta, and for the first time ever, I was supposed to speak somewhere. I didn't make it, and finally, at about 10:30 at night, I'm going back and forth with the team there, and pastors on vacation, and I said, somebody gets to get a fresh word from God because I'm not going to get there.
mm,
And having been in similar circumstances, that sounds bad, and it kind of is, but there's an adrenaline that comes. You know what I mean? There's like, okay, God, I need something. I'm
yeah,
depending on you. And maybe we depend on God more during, times like that, but there's an adrenaline that comes. But also over time, there's just, it's hard. It's difficult. You've got to make decisions and you don't feel like making decisions, right? Um, you got to preach and you don't feel like doing that. Uh, uh, Jason says a personal attack from a staff member that they had to let go. And we've had that. Nobody gets
yeah,
excited about when it's time to go, right? And Paul said leading a church in New York City through 2020, the pandemic and the election and racial tensions. That was
yeah.
that
Whew.
was that was the hardest, most challenging leadership step up or challenge that I know I've ever had. You were here with us during all of that, and we really hadn't had what I'd call, difficult uh, church meetings or leadership meetings or anything like that in 30 years. And then all of a sudden, everything's up for grabs. I remember that. That was difficult.
I tell
Rick's,
you, Greg,
yeah.
I was so glad I wasn't lead pastor of a church during that time.
Oh, man.
Gosh, I was glad.
Yeah. It was hard. It was difficult for everybody. And COVID has changed everything. COVID's over, but people's, church attendance or frequency of, and there's just a lot of things that have changed. Trust in leadership. There's just a lot of things. Rick says alcoholism with a spouse, very very challenging. Not just that particular issue, but when you're going through it with your spouse, that's a challenge. Um, yeah, um, there's a lot of them. Just a lot. Grief, loss of a son.
Mm,
That's
gosh.
challenging. Unbelievable. So many things. Well, listen. What I want to do today, and I'm trying to make sure I hit all the right buttons at the right time. I'm my own engineer in this. we're on a real thin dime, Chip. But let's start by sharing a bit of what we've both walked through recently and how it affected us personally and what we've
Mhm.
learned through it. And I'll talk just a minute about um, just about my issue and the grief. As many of you know, my brother, who was 52 years old, 17 years younger than me. In fact, I remember when Mom announced that we were going to have a baby brother. It was one of those kind of whoops, we didn't plan on this. We already had three in our family, and I think we're going to Christmas with a relative, and Mom said, we got a surprise. We're going to get something new. And I'm thinking, we're getting a puppy. This is going to be great. And she said, it's either a brother or a sister, because I don't think we knew that kind of stuff like we know it now. And it was almost a little bit of disappointment. I had my heart set on a puppy, but little brother's born. And, what a joy that was. It really was to our family. And I wasn't around much because I left the home at about 18 years old. But when we started Seacoast, not too long after, I mean, a few years, we hired Chris to be a part of our team here, and I really got to know him then. He was here for, I think, 14 years, and just a great guy, and very talented, very gifted writer. He became an expert on small groups, worked for Lifeway, and he liked to tell my other brother Jeff and I, who we've written several books between us, and Chris always liked to say, remind us that one of his books on small groups sold more than all of ours all put together, you know. And we'd done a podcast together, just got started with a Surratt Brothers podcast. And Chris got up to go to work one day, and he died. Had an aneurysm, and just a few, like to say, weeks ago. It's been about 3 or 4 months now, and one of the most devastating things I've ever experienced. I mean, I've gone through grief before. I lost my mother when she was 54 years old to cancer, and she had about a 5-year journey with that. And if you've been through that, I mean, it's devastating. It's hard. All of those, but it just it's sometimes with when there's a long fight, there's a battle, there's a rejoicing that they go home, and there's grief, but it's different. And then when Darren Patrick, and you and I both knew Darren, took his own life during COVID. There was grief through that, although, and we can talk about that when we talk about it a little bit later. For me, it was almost like I had to lead through it. It was, suck it up, buddy. You're the leader, and you've got to lead through. And I don't think that was real healthy. But when Chris died, it was just devastating. It was. I actually got a book on sibling grief. I didn't know that there were, such thing as different types of grief, and sudden grief and sibling grief, and just felt my life was almost in a spin cycle for a while. Didn't know where you were. Cried at the most inopportune times, and a lot of times. And so I've kind of been walking through that journey, and then I decided early on that I was going to not ignore the grief, but embrace the grief. And I went public with some of it. I thought, I'm a leader, and maybe, I could either bottle it up or, pretend like things are okay when I'm in public, or let's just be honest. So I went on Facebook and just talked a little bit about my feelings during all that process. And but after, a couple of 3 weeks of kind of licking my wounds, you've got to get back in the fray. And, there's retreats coming, there's fundraising you got to do, there's messages you've got to preach. And I'll talk a little bit later maybe about one that I did preach in the midst of it, and kind of how that landed. But that's been my journey for the last few weeks, and so this is all pretty fresh. Chip, what about you? Kind of, I know we've talked about it before, but kind of bring us up to date on what happened with you. And in fact, your situation was a part of piling on the grief for me, to be honest with you, because before Chris died in January, in December, I remember when you and I had kind of what I call a last supper together. It was actually a lunch, and we were you had not been approved for a lung transplant. And
Right.
I went home and I already was grieving, even though I was in faith, but I was grieving my friend. And just bring us up to date a little bit about your journey and some of your thoughts on it, especially as leadership goes.
Well, I'll start with that. That was when we were right at the. I mean, I was not in a good place. My oxygen lung capacity was very restricted. I knew I probably had months left, and they hit me at the last minute with my need for a liver biopsy to be qualified for a transplant. And they said basically it's a binary, like if the test goes one way, you're qualified for a transplant. If it goes the other way, you're not. Well, I knew what that meant. If I didn't get a transplant, I had, maybe a few months to live, and we had to wait. They did the biopsy, and we had to wait. I think it was 5 days for the results, and that's when we had what you said, what you called the last lunch. And I was confident that I was going to come through it okay, but um, I'm also a person who you might say I plan for the worst but expect the best or something like that. And I'd had the diagnosis idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis for 8 years. So, I carried that and pretty much kept it to myself for probably six or so. Now, I let people like you and friends, and there was a decent sized group that knew about it. But until I had to go on oxygen, I'd kept it pretty quiet. And it was tricky. It was tricky how to, you normally think about the future and you normally think, well, when I'm at this stage, I'll do this, and this age, I'll do this. And it was interesting how it affected your thinking and projecting. And now the cool thing is I had the peace of God. I would tell friends, and I probably said this to you, Greg, it's like I had an effortless peace through it. I knew I was going to be okay, and it was kind of weird. And at one point, I knew I was going to have a lung transplant instead of just an outright healing. And you'd think, well, that must have helped, and it did immensely. But uh, you know, you got to cash the check, and until you cash the check, it's all about trust. And so it was quite a journey.
Yeah.
8 years for my wife and and I don't know, probably a good three or four for friends like you and others. And I'd have to hide it a bit because you know, I'd get out of breath speaking and stuff, and I'd have to kind of hide it and whatever. And it was just tricky for a while.
Well,
But
thinking about
go ahead.
that, let's talk about the pressure of having to show up and lead when
Yeah,
you'd rather, lie down and disappear. There
yeah,
were several people shared various things, and uh, if there was a common theme, it had to do with either grief of losing somebody or conflict.
yeah.
Conflict with a staff member, conflict with the denomination,
Right.
conflict with people in the church, political pressures, all that kind
Sure.
of thing. Or when I'd get an email or a text or a letter back in the letter days from somebody in the church that said we're leaving, and it's not about you, but it always feels like it is, right, and then you've got to either get up or you've got to study or you've got to lead meetings and all that. What about the pressure of having to show up? How do we give ourselves grace without checking out completely? Have you thought about that? Is that like,
Yeah, I think your situation comes into play. I mean, quite honestly, I needed the finances, so that was part of it, just to be honest.
mm-hmm,
Um, I love what I do. I mean, I really do. I'm energized by it. Uh, Gosh, I've met some amazing people. Um, and I was in a position where I wasn't pastoring a church, so it wasn't like I had to, come up with fresh bread. I uh, I could control, I could manage my schedule somewhat,
mm-hmm,
and so I don't know that I did it that well, but so that's different from if you're in a situation like a lead pastor,
yeah,
um, smaller church or larger church, but if the model that is expected of you is to speak every week or pretty much every week, that's a whole different animal. Um, if I got to where I wasn't feeling particularly well, um, I was going to say I could take off, but when you've got something scheduled for months, it's hard to do that. But if you got to crank something out every week and you got certain meetings you've got to be at and all that kind of stuff, um, I mean that just takes grit and growl, man. Um, and maybe if your team is configured properly, you can offload some of that, which would be good.
You know, we
Um,
we had a guy at the retreat not long ago who had a smaller church, and his wife had died just a few weeks before,
oh my
and
gosh.
he was still preaching every week.
Hmm.
I don't know that he took one weekend away. Felt like he had to. Do you think is that wise? Is that you know?
Can't be.
Yeah,
No, no, I would assume he was maybe in a position where he felt like he didn't have any choices.
exactly. Yeah,
Um, and again, not to mix subjects, but that's one of the reasons we're so strong on finding a band of brothers,
exactly.
because you get in a pinch like that. Like we know some people, both of us,
Right.
that hit rough spots,
Hmm.
and their friends stepped up and said,
Yes.
"I'll do this Sunday. I'll do this Sunday. I'll do this Sunday," and they covered him for, gosh, I'm thinking of one. I think they preached for him for like 2 months,
Yeah.
and
And that's a pitch for the retreat at Church Creek because we see that
yeah,
happen all the time.
right,
Guys will
right,
come in, maybe they don't know anybody or don't have a lot of friends, and
yeah,
they leave with a band of brothers, which is probably the according to some wise guys that wrote a book one time called The Endurance Factor.
come on,
That's kind of one of the meta skills. In fact, number one meta skill in lasting long in ministry. Hey, you've
yeah,
got a pastoral survey that you put together in anticipation of what we're doing, and I think I've got that we can look at and put up on the screen. There it is. Can you see that, Chip? Can you see it?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
You want to take us through that just a little bit? And it says self assessment for pastors. And by the way, if you would like a copy of this, you can go to churchcreek.cc/pastor self. Okay. And it's down there on the screen. You can see that. And we're making it available for free. And but what's making this season of ministry harder for me? Instructions are to prayerfully reflect on each category. Check any statements that resonate with your current experience. You want to kind of take us through some of that a little bit?
yeah. The cool thing, Greg, is seven. Uh, I'll just be honest. I had a little help from what you call your assistant, which is AI, and I it came up with 7 areas of potential stress, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought they were very very good.
Yeah.
The emotional load. Um, if you I don't know if the guys or anybody watching can see it, but you know, you're carrying emotional pain, yours or somebody else's. I don't know if you've ever looked into the whole idea of compassion fatigue. As a counselor, I get caught in that occasionally,
What does that
where,
mean? What's compassion
well,
fatigue?
it's almost like your compassion tank's empty, and it's like I just don't know if I care for anything else.
Okay.
Um, like I've noticed over the years that I'd go through stretches where I just wouldn't cry. Like somebody tell me this horrible story, and it didn't touch me like it normally would.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I would. I always knew that was a warning sign that that I'd kind of worn out my tear ducts, and my heart was hardening a little bit, and so that's an important thing to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm.
Because if here's the thing, if you don't monitor stuff like that, it'll continue to progress until one day you just think your lack of feeling is normal,
Hmm.
and your wife and people around you'll be like, dude, you didn't used to react like that in situations. You used to love, someone sharing their hurt with you. Now you're just impatient and kind of tolerate it. And
I
all of those
was
are all of those are indicators.
uh, significant losses that we haven't fully
Right.
processed. I have
Absolutely.
done that. In fact, I did it through the Darren thing. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
process it well because I
Right.
felt like I couldn't, just had to, and so then you
Yeah.
end up processing it later. Okay.
There's some events like that, Greg, that are so outside of the expectation of the reality we're in that you almost don't know how to process it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of those that just, I mean, it was a sucker punch from
Yeah.
left field's an understatement.
Yeah.
And but it still is good to talk because when you pull your thoughts out into the light, you even without even somebody giving you feedback, when you say them out loud, you realize how they don't make sense.
Hmm.
And there's just something therapeutic about talking, even if it's not with a skilled person.
Yeah.
The next one on there's relational dynamics. Um, other people's unrealistic expectations of you. Um, you feel criticized or compared all. I mean, I would say comparison right now is at a level that's inconceivable because of social media.
Oh,
You can so quickly, how many clicks, who said nice things about my message, you look at maybe some guys you consider competitors and you compare yourself to them and uh, that'll eat your lunch, man.
boy, I hear that all the time
Yeah,
at the table. It's just, yeah, it's overwhelming.
yeah. A little phrasing that helped me was know yourself, like yourself, be yourself. And that was really helpful to me to just admit some things about myself.
Hmm.
Like I came out of the, charismania movement and people would call me to come speak for them. And I'd say, okay, let's make sure you understand something. I'm not a revivalist. We're not going to have a meeting with crazy stuff happening. I'm a thinker and I'm a processor, and I'll do you some good, and your people will think at a level maybe they haven't ever before in their life, and they'll be thinking about what we do weeks and months after I'm there. But if you're looking for a revivalist, I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
And it just
And,
helped me to,
well, coming out of the background that we've come out of, because I came out of a similar background
yeah, yeah,
where the preacher is expected to shuck the corn,
yeah, yeah,
or if you're a conference speaker and
yeah,
that's kind of the expectation, it can really get to your
yeah.
mental capacity a little bit, and
Oh yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. And I would say it's better now. Now, probably because I'm moving in different circles, quite honestly.
right.
There's probably still some circles that would be an issue.
Hmm.
But back to the number two there, relational
Yeah.
dynamics. Um, I often feel lonely or isolated. Again, that's some of the stuff that we push, and I don't mean to be pushing it, but we want every minister to never say that again.
Hmm.
That you don't feel, no matter what you're going through, self-induced, self-inflicted, or other inflicted, that you don't feel lonely. You always have a safe place to run. And let me say something I've been thinking, Greg,
Yeah.
that I knew would come out sooner or later. Um, Colleen and I developed a phrase we've used throughout our marriage. It's tough to make bullets when you're in the foxhole getting shot at.
Mm.
You got to think about that. It's tough to make bullets or learn to shoot when you're in a foxhole getting shot at. And what I'm saying is, any of this stuff we're talking about is going to land better, process better, and live better if you've prepared by doing certain things like a band of brothers and some other things that'll probably come up. But preparation, man. Um, and I think that's part of why my going through what I went through went better than normal. I had a great support system, great friends, forgive me, but a great relationship with God.
Hmm.
Um, and it just was different. It was different than it would have been in my life 10 years before. Um, so I just want to throw that in there.
Hmm.
Identity pressure. Um, I struggle to separate my role from my identity.
Boy, that's a big one for
Yeah,
pastors, especially, isn't it?
yeah. You're only as good as your last show, is what I used to think.
Yeah.
And way back before I started to learn some of the stuff about the Father's love and all that, it took me a while to realize and be honest with myself that behind the scenes the radio station was playing, and after a Sunday, what it was playing was, I don't know why they come, and I don't know why they come back next week, and it was just a lie, and
Hmm.
it was a lie that I tolerated because they did come back,
Yeah.
and
Hey, listen, they don't remember your sermon
no,
after they get
No,
out of the parking lot. And
no.
we're working so hard on it and think it's the end of the
Yeah,
world. Yeah,
right.
exactly.
That was helpful. It was helpful for me to realize, you know what, dude, get him to first base. You don't
Yeah,
have to hit a home run.
yeah,
Just, let's enjoy the presence of God and open his word and go home.
yeah.
And that really helped.
Well, he's the one that
You
transforms
know,
lives, I think. I think that's how it, I
yeah,
don't think
yeah,
Greg and Chip are the ones that do
yeah.
it, but yeah.
But I don't know, like if I'm thinking about a pastor who's out there and he's got to preach, every week,
Hmm.
I don't, it's hard to get there by yourself.
Right.
Um, if you don't have some other pastors that you trust, that you spend time with, that you build this sense of I call it mask off community. Um, it's hard to get there because some of this stuff you gotta say it out loud,
Hmm.
and that helps. And then number two, somebody responds and says, well, I deal with that too. And maybe they share, God helped me this, and this really helped or something.
Hmm.
And because you don't have to live with that, man. That's probably what drives me crazy the most, Craig. I mean, the counselor in me, the pastor in me, I hear pastors suffering with some of the stuff,
Hmm.
but they do it as if there's no solution. And there is. You don't have to suffer with the stuff. The kind of stuff we're talking about right now.
Right. So, time and energy demands.
Yeah,
Um, I have difficulty setting clear work boundaries. That's a big one, isn't it?
yeah.
I remember years ago when I felt like I was the savior of the world. I'd forgotten that Jesus had died for us all, and I thought it was me that was doing that. And uh, I didn't have proper boundaries around my schedule or my family because I felt like I had to be available 24/7
Yeah,
to everybody's needs. Now, you can be so boundaried off that it's ridiculous,
yeah.
you got to learn how to, we're going to, especially, meal times or Fridays when I'm off or whatever. That's you just have to make some boundaries, or you won't last for the long haul.
Well, you say what you said, Fridays and meal times and all. Here's a big thought that most leaders have to wrestle with.
Hmm.
And once they hear it out loud and put on the table in front of them, they're like, oh, wow. Here's the thing, you can be there and not be there.
Hmm.
And that's what typically goes awry in most pastors' families. Yeah, I take Friday off and my wife and I spend time together. But up here, I haven't checked out.
Right.
Up here, I'm thinking about my message for the weekend. I'm thinking about that issue with so and so. And you can look in some eyes, and you can tell they're not there. Like I used to say this, with most leaders, you got about a 3 to 5 minute window, and after that, you're not going to get their undivided attention. You're
Hmm.
just not. They're gone, and you got to figure out how to practice leaving work. I mean, leaving work, and I don't mean just physically, but up here, and maybe even developing a leaving work ritual.
Okay, talk to us
Like,
about how do you do that? I mean, that sounds wonderful,
yeah, I mean,
but
like
how do
like
you
picture
do it?
yourself, yeah, like picture yourself, however long your drive is from church to home
Hmm.
or wherever you work, could be anything. And your hands are on the steering wheel, you're driving, but here's what you're saying. I'm great, good day, bad day, maybe you process your day for a minute, but then you say this, I'm on my way to my most important job.
Hmm.
I'm leaving my part-time job. I'm on my way to my, other than God Himself, my first level priority, and that's my wife and children.
Hmm.
So I've got to let go of my secondary employment and start focusing on my primary employment. And I need to go home and be present and on task and have energy
That's
and
good.
and not let your work get your best energy and your family get leftovers.
That's good. Love that. How about leadership stress? Look at that. Number
Let
five.
me say something else about the
Okay, go ahead.
energy demands.
Go ahead.
Um, I've had this conversation often, let's say, talking to a pastor. I have certain pastors that within 3 sentences, I'm not talking 3 minutes, I'm talking 3 sentences in a conversation, they're telling me how busy they are.
Mhm.
Man, I'm so busy. And what I learned to do, and it can be a little bit irritating to some of them. I'll look like I'm really concerned and like, oh, bless you, brother. I said, let me ask you, who sets your schedule?
Oh boy.
Uh, who do you answer to for how you use your time? And all I'm doing is watch until the lights go on.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I do. Well, why are you whining about how tired you are?
What's your Enneagram again? You're an 8, right?
8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A counselor with an 8 Enneagram. You just like to, you like getting people's heads and then confront them over it. It's been great for me. I love it. Yeah.
But I think that's been helpful to some of them to realize, hey, wait a minute. I
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to. And then another thing that helped me so much, Greg, I think in most of your business literature, they call it batching.
Yeah.
But I got to where I had certain days, like I had a counseling practice on the side. I
Right.
was lead pastor of a church. I of course I had a wife and kids and all that, and I was traveling. And what I figured out, my stress level was kind of high. And what I figured out was, and this is a key thought, it was the changing gears that was wearing me out.
Yeah.
Like I'd wake up on Monday and I'd work a little bit on church stuff, and then I'd have counseling that afternoon. And then I'd wake up on Tuesday and have church meetings and have to do planning or something. Then on Wednesday, I'd whatever. And I realized, okay, time out. Monday's going to be a counseling day. Tuesday's going to be a church day. Wednesday, I think, was a message prep day. And Thursday was, I think, half and half. But what it did for me, Greg, was I didn't have to shift gears. Somebody said, hey, can I meet you for counseling on Tuesday? I said, no, can't do it. Well, my life's falling apart. And I don't say this, but I'm thinking, yeah, it probably has been for about a year or two.
Right. Right.
And now you want it to be an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And but I got to be very, 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 very firm about it. And I started to be more peaceful
Well, not
because I,
only are you more peaceful, let's back up because some people, not everybody's listening as a pastor here,
right, true.
and sometimes it might seem kind of cruel, or do you really care? And what people don't understand is not only is it better for you, but they're not getting your best.
Yeah, it's
When
a good
when
point.
you're, and I read something the other day, and I don't remember where it was. Should have written it down. Probably did somewhere, but I don't remember because I'm getting old. But it was talking about pastoral work being, some of the more challenging work that there is, and one of the
Mhm.
reasons is because of the lack of batching. You might,
Yeah,
in a typical situation, you're going from, hey, let's work on a message, think about that. Somebody's got an emergency, let's talk about it. And it is soul, uh, what do I want to say? It's, you feel so bad for somebody. You feel like,
yeah,
I want to help and I want to do it. And so you are and you do. And then you walk out of that and you've got to make a decision on how many widgets do we order this week for this, that, or the other.
mhm,
And it goes back and
yeah,
forth and back and forth and back
yeah,
and forth. And there's no recovery.
yeah,
And you aren't created to do that. So that's really, really important. I had the same thing with my schedule.
yeah,
I still do, but when I was the lead pastor, very important because I preached every week, or you know, 35, 40 times a year, and so scheduled certain day for study, certain day for meeting with people, certain day
yeah,
for all the different things that you do, and put it in the calendar and abided by it so that you didn't have this crazy
yeah.
thing going on. Yeah, so it's so important.
Another important thing, Greg, like if you just what you described a minute ago, you're working on a sermon and somebody interrupts you with an emergency, and then you got to come
Hmm.
back and make decisions about widgets. What people don't realize is no matter what occupation you're in,
Yeah.
what happens is every time that happens, you build up a little bit of resentment, and
Hmm.
then a little bit more and a little bit more. And after a while, I mean, it takes a decent time, but after a while, you resent people, you resent the
Hmm.
ministry, you resent the obligations you feel And part of it, not all of it, but part of it is you're just not managing your schedule wisely to
Hmm.
where you're protecting that energy flow. They've done all kinds of studies on what the cost of interruptions
Hmm.
and focus and energy and all that kind of thing. And joy. I mean, you get working on a sermon and you're really in a groove and it's like, oh man, it's coming together. And then somebody interrupts you with maybe a legitimate thing. You still feel this like, oh man, because you were in flow, you were
Hmm.
rolling, man. And
So whose fault is that? Is that the person that interrupted you? Because you just said
well,
earlier you control, you
yeah,
know, but, again,
well,
we love people. And
yeah,
when you get
yeah,
to the point where you're resentful of the
yeah,
interruptions from people, then we've got something going on there. And
yeah,
oftentimes it's a systemic issue. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah. Almost always.
yeah, it's I control my schedule to a great degree. There will be exceptions, but don't live in the exception.
Right,
And when you make time for study here, and you make time for people here, and you keep those very guarded as much as you can, then you
right,
operate well and you serve people well, right? Is that kind of what
right.
what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. I like this phrase. You train people how to treat you.
Hmm.
You train people how to treat you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would add to that in the context of what we're talking about. There's very, very, very few true emergencies.
Right.
Most of them are chronic issues that the person has had a situational impact of some kind that's heightened their awareness and they want to deal with it. I'm ready to deal with it.
It's
Well,
important, but it's not urgent, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and there could even be a little bit of urgency to it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been there for 10 years.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
what
Well,
I
it's
what
important. What I meant was, it's an important issue for that person, but
sure,
it may not be urgent for
yeah,
you right now.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, it might not be time sensitive.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And what I would probably do is say, hey, maybe do something to let them know I heard them. And then I'd say, you know what? It would work out great for me if we could meet tomorrow at 3 o'clock or something. And and again, like you said, it's a cultural thing. It needs to become consistently uh, just enforced in your culture that we don't drop everything for your cat died. Um, and forgive me if anybody's cat just died, but
That would kind of be a good thing, wouldn't it, though?
I should have known. I should have realized that I'd get
I'm
a
so
reaction out of
sorry.
that.
I'm a dog guy, but that's all right. Yeah.
Under leadership stress, Greg, it's interesting that there's two issues that jump out from just reading those three statements. One is people and the awkwardness of dealing with them, and the other one is the sense of control.
Hmm.
Um, and they kind of overlap, don't they?
Yeah.
Um, you can't control people. You can't control, like the volunteers and the third one there.
Right. Yeah. There's
And it
very,
and
very
it
little in
changed,
life that you can
yeah,
control. Yeah.
and change particularly like in what we were just talking about in a culture or in an organization. Change is multi-layered, multifaceted. Um, Always should take longer than we think it should,
Hmm.
and so therefore we don't plan well, and we turn the bus too abruptly, and we throw people off the
Yeah.
bus, and then we get mad at the people because they're off the bus when we're the ones who threw them off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Been there, done that.
I learned this about people, Greg. Most people are good people.
Hmm.
Most people want to be heard. They don't have to get their way.
Hmm.
They just want to be heard. Now, there's some that want to get their way, but most people, 51% or more, they just want to know that you took the time to listen to them.
Right.
And most pastors aren't real good at that.
A phrase that someone taught me a long time ago, and I violate it from time to time, and it doesn't live well when I do, but people support a world they help to create.
Yeah,
And that doesn't mean you
absolutely.
can be collaborative about everything, but the
Right.
more information people have, the better more
Yeah.
likely they are to, want to be a part of whatever it
Yeah.
is. Hey, let me just say this. There's some comments that some people are having a hard time accessing the URL that I've got up there, churchcreek.cc/pastor self. And we will, what will we do here? We'll get we'll share it in another link later here on YouTube and in the Facebook comments. So it'll be in there. But anyway, feeling like this is so good. I've got a lot more I want to get through. I feel like we need to do a Joe Rogan here. Let's do about 3 hours, but let's keep going. Let's keep trucking on this. We'll cut some other stuff out. Spiritual challenges. I'm walking through a spiritually dry season. Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
I'm just going to say honestly that boy, do I relate to all of that. Feel like a hypocrite when my personal life doesn't match my teaching. That happens sometimes. I lack safe spaces to be honest about my struggles. Honestly, before I met you, how many ever years ago that was, I remember the first time, we won't go through that again, but first time I had to sit down with a counseling session with you, I thought I'm going to have to make some stuff up, because I don't have problems. And but really didn't have anybody to talk to.
Yeah.
But walking through spiritually dry season, I remember at Seacoast going through a personally dry season, and the church was doing good. It really was.
Yeah.
But I was tired of the where we were going, what we were doing, and it was probably more personal for me. But out of that came rather than just give up and quit or pretend like it wasn't true, I went to the Lord and said, I am dry, 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 and help me. And went to some people around me and said, help me. I'm just not, I don't know what it is, but help me. And I did several things. But one of the things that came out of that was the response time that we have now at Seacoast, which has
Yeah.
helped our church to feel alive, for the last 15 or 20 years. It feels as vibrant every weekend just because we changed some things. And that came out of a very spiritually dry season for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Let me just say for everybody's, you tell that story about the counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just stress to anybody watching, he's not kidding. He came into that counseling
I
session
did.
thinking he had no
I
issues
didn't.
whatsoever.
I was a lead
Now,
pastor, man, doing great. Didn't have issues.
y'all need to just really think about that for a minute. He like he just thought, I don't know what this guy's going to talk about. I'm
Well, I'd
good.
never been to a counselor before. I didn't, we used to preach against those, right? If you
Yeah,
just
it's
if
true.
you just
True.
press in prayer, if you just read your Bible more, you'll be all right. You'll be fine. And
Yeah.
so the problem is yours. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The I'll start with that last one there. I lack safe spaces. I do not lack safe spaces. Um, I don't know that I ever have. And here's why. I live with this sense that I'm an accident waiting to happen. And I don't mean that as a self-critical. I just mean I know myself pretty well. And if I don't keep people in my life that I've empowered and given permission to challenge me on anything they observe that concerns them. Um, and I don't like surface conversation. I like depth. So when I hang out with friends, we're not talking about the deer you shot last weekend. Now, y'all can talk about it and I'll stand there and nod and act interested.
We're just
But
not going to invite you to the
yeah, there
deer
you
shooting
go.
event. Yeah.
But I enjoy being around everybody. But my point is, I I'm pretty transparent,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think, and Greg, you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think I invite the input. I hope I do. It's
You
my
do,
intention.
yeah, without a doubt,
Yeah.
without a doubt, yeah. And that's what
I
I like about um, our relationship and what I've found at this at this point in my life is we can have fun, we can talk about stuff, and
Yeah.
we don't go hunting together or golfing because you don't do that stuff. You read books and stuff, but and watch and analyze people. But we have a good time together, and we can get real quick. We can talk
Yeah.
about what's going on, and it's just a
Yeah.
healthy thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you have people around you, I promise you, you have people around you that you could develop that with.
yeah,
And yes, you should be picky about it. Yes, you should be careful to some degree. But um, I don't know which causes more damage. Not having it at all because of the fear of it hurting you or the hurt that it could cause.
yeah.
I'm not sure which is worse
Right.
because if you,
The tool that we use at the retreat is so simple.
yeah,
Highs and lows, sharing highs and lows. We
yeah,
do other things too, but sharing
yeah,
highs and lows together. But
yeah,
that is a tool that will allow you with two or three people to go below the
yeah,
surface if you'll do that on a
absolutely.
regular basis.
Yeah,
Just, hey, what's your high? What's your low? How you
yeah,
doing? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And maybe have an agreement, Greg, that you don't, there's no expectation that you're going to solve or fix my problem.
No,
I just need a safe place to share my
just to
problem,
listen.
my challenge, my stress, whatever it is.
Right.
But there's no expectations that you're going to solve it or fix it for me.
Yeah. I love
And
it.
just sometimes just the sharing in a safe place will fix it.
So we're on number 7, which is cultural and
Let
societal.
me say one more thing about 6.
I
I
always try
remember
to rush you on, don't I? I got to just slow down and let you go.
well, I remember years ago when I was pastor of my own church. I don't remember the circumstances. I think it was when what I talked to you about earlier, the when I had people get mad at me because I stopped
Right,
preaching just this one slant.
right.
Well, somewhere after that, I called a friend of mine and I said, dude, I said, I'm just running on empty, man. I can put a message together, I can deliver it, but it's just not, it doesn't feel life-giving. And I said this. He lived in Atlanta, I think, at the time. And I said, listen, dude, I know it's going to cost me some money, but could you come for a month and preach for me?
Hmm,
The whole month is yours.
hmm,
I need some time to just all of my spiritual effort to be about reconnecting with God. Because that's what I found when I'm in a dry season. What God always takes me back to is it isn't this or that, it's you.
hmm.
Let's get you back on track with me, and then we'll deal with this or that.
Right.
And and sure enough, he came. And honestly, by the second week, I was feeling better. But I said, let's just finish the month out. And we had a great time. He had a great time. And he was a good friend, so he didn't charge me an arm and a leg. And it really, really pulled me out of it really, really well.
Hmm. And there are those friends around. We
Yes.
just have to tap
Yeah.
into them. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Um, I just made a legislative decision here. We're going to split this into two categories. We've talked about a little bit about some leadership things and a self-assessment. We're going to talk about grief also, but I think what we'll do, Chip, if it's all right with you, maybe on our next time, our next Friends Forum, let's do a whole deal about grief.
Mhm.
And I'll talk a little bit about what I'm learning. But you know what's more than losing a family member or a friend? As a pastor, you experience grief every time you lose anything. When someone leaves the church, even some of the issues that we talked about earlier, when you've got a staff member that something went crosswise, I think we overlook the grief piece of that. And how do we process that? What do we do?
Mhm.
And so let's do a whole session on that. Sound good?
Mhm.
Are you in?
Yeah, I was looking at the what's under this number 7. Maybe we could do grief and kind of the mental health implications of it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. We're going to do that for the next time. So you don't want to miss this. Next time we're going to do grief and mental health and how that impacts you as a pastor. We'll get you the link to all of this. I want to give you a quick message, and then we're going to come back and wrap this up. But take a look at this and just listen for just a minute. Greg Surratt here with a thought on how you can be a friend to ministers. Ministry burnout is a real problem, but there is a solution. Research shows that pastors often struggle under the pressure of ministry. They can feel isolated, overwhelmed, unsupported. In fact, 75% of pastors struggle with personal relationships. 47% feel lonely and isolated. 33% have considered quitting ministry in the previous 12 months. Over 5,000 churches close each year, and over 500 pastors quit each month. The Pastors Collective is dedicated to helping ministry leaders live well and finish strong. Here's what we do. We come alongside pastors and we foster soul care. We curate a community. We develop resources on mental health in ministry. So, what's our solution to the current burnout crisis? There's three things. Number one are retreats. We believe that restoration begins with a hard reset of rest in a retreat setting. Our retreats are designed to help individuals relax, restore, and reconnect with God and a like-minded ministry leaders. We also believe that relationships are vital. Life-giving relationships that begin in the retreat are nurtured through ongoing cohorts, which are kind of like a small group that provides growth and learning and ongoing encouragement. And then the third piece of the puzzle are resources. Pastors Collective connects individuals to ministries and mental health professionals if needed, and other resources that we're developing and other people develop for continued healing and growth. So here's the question. Is it working? Well, since opening our doors in 2021, we've served over 2,000 pastors and leaders in over 150 retreats. 51% of the participants say the retreat was life-changing. An additional 46% say it was very helpful. In fact, a pastor the other day said not only was it life-changing, but for him, it was life-saving. One pastor said, "I didn't know how much I needed this retreat until I arrived." Life and ministry can sneak up on you, and it isn't until you slow down that you realize how far off course that you can drift. He said, "This retreat has brought me back to my center." You know, here's what I think. I think every pastor needs what we offer at the retreat at Church Creek, but my passion is what my friend and co-founder of ARC, Billy Hornsby, called the little guy. They're the pastors of small churches that often can't afford to get the help they need. Billy challenged me on his deathbed to never forget about the little guy, and that's why I need your help. By becoming a friend of Pastors Collective, your monthly support will change lives, and I believe will turn the tide of pastoral burnout. Check out the incredible value of becoming a friend of Pastors Collective is for you and your staff and your church. For a gift of as small as $125 a month, you'll receive an invitation to a monthly Friends Forum with myself and other people, some of my friends involved in this same area of ministry. You'll also get a quarterly missions impact report that you can share with your church, quarterly testimony videos, and in addition to that, and probably most importantly, you'll be scholarshiping one pastor over a year's period of time to attend the retreat. For a gift of $200 a month, you get all of that, plus you sponsor two pastors who couldn't have afforded it otherwise. $500 a month sponsors 4 pastors. $1,500 a month sponsors 12 pastors. We even have churches that are becoming friends at $5,000 a month. They believe in it so much, and they're sponsoring as many as 40 pastors. Here's what's important. Will you help me today? Will you help me to build a generation of leaders who will live well and finish strong? I believe in this so strongly that I'm devoting the rest of my life to this cause. I want to help pastors be well so they can build well. If you'd like more information about how you can help, go to pastorscollective.com/friends. Again, that's pastorscollective.com/friends. See, friends don't let friends do ministry alone. And so let's stand with pastors and Christian leaders and let's change the story together. There we go. There's Chip. Yeah, and we feel very strongly about that. And we really do appreciate your help as you care for and invest in pastors. Chip, we're going to wrap it up. Just what's maybe just a real quick encouraging word that you could give to someone who's walking, or who's watching, who might be walking through a really hard season right now. What would you say?
It's hard to see over the hill, and sometimes you're on the ascending, climbing, uncomfortable part of it, and it's hard to see it. It's hard to believe it's there, but they're in most situations, and we all know that there are some that this would not be true, but there's another day coming. There's breakthrough, particularly if you take advantage of some of what we've discussed today. Um, Normally things don't change much unless we change something. And now, if it's in any part of our behavior that's put us in a situation, but um, God will get you through it, however He's got to get you through it. And I'm old enough and been around long enough that I don't talk about how well your life's going to be dreamy and peachy and never going to have a challenge or a problem. And that's probably one revelation we all need to chew on a little bit. That I'm not sure life's meant to be as good as we've preached it at times. And life's hard, man. And even with God in our life, it's hard, and we need help.
Yes, I so agree with that. One of my favorite thoughts when it comes to difficult seasons, and like you say, some are, longer and more extensive than others, but they come to pass. In other words,
Yeah, yep.
it's going to
That's a good,
happen,
yeah,
but it's also going to pass. And this isn't going to
yeah,
be your story for the rest of your life, most likely. It will pass. And even in the process, God brings people, friends, He brings comfort, He brings safety, and you're not alone. And we want to help you. And I want to just say thank you for spending time with us today. If you're hurting,
yeah,
if you're grieving, or just feeling worn out, we hope that you're walking away knowing this, that you are not alone and you don't have to fake it to be faithful. And God does some of His best work in the middle of a mess. Would you agree with that? I believe that He does. So, anyway, thanks for being a part, and we'll get you information on our next Friends Forum. And Chip, thanks for being a part of this. Thanks for sharing your wisdom.
yeah.
And
I enjoy it.
we hope to see y'all again soon.